While doing his daily checks in the monkey enclosure, zookeeper Rick found a small baby monkey that he didn't recognize. He had no idea where the little monkey came from and didn't remember any of the monkeys even being pregnant that year, so where did he come from? As Rick looked closer, he realized that this monkey was different than the others at the zoo. So he had a veterinarian run a DNA test on him, and the results were shocking. Rick had never seen an animal like this in his career. Even though he knew it was a monkey, it looked strangely human. But the monkey was still very young, so it might not have grown into its features yet. But Rick was even more stunned when he noticed that the monkey behaved in a way that no other baby monkey did. Charles was the veterinarian at the zoo, and he was an expert at taking care of animals. Many of the animals at the zoo were very fond of him due to his kind and gentle nature. Rick decided that a DNA test would be their best bet to figure out more about the baby monkey and where it came from. When Charles tried to collect blood for the DNA test, he attempted to use a needle that he frequently used to collect samples. But when he attempted to push it into the monkey's skin, the needle broke. The vet had never seen anything like this before, but he figured it was a fault needle. Maybe the next one would work. Charles got a bigger needle to collect the sample with and attempted to push it through the monkey's skin. He didn't want to hurt the baby animal, but it didn't seem to mind, even though this needle could easily puncture a large adult gorilla. This needle also snapped while the doctor was applying pressure. Why would this be happening? Charles decided to use a scalpel to collect the blood sample needed for the test. He was finally able to do so, and he hoped that the testing would bring him answers about the newborn monkey's strength and appearance. The two men anxiously awaited the results of the test. It will take several days to see the results from the test, so Rick and Charles decided to put the monkey in the monkey area with other baby monkeys in the meantime. When Rick arrived at the zoo the next day, he noticed something he'd never seen before in his career as a zookeeper. The baby monkey was standing on a rock and seemed to be trying to say something to all the other little monkeys who were staring at him. It couldn't be, thought Rick. It's very strange, but this is a very unusual situation at this zoo. The baby monkey appeared to be exhibiting leadership among his fellow baby monkeys. However, this is not possible. The baby monkeys are only 2 days old, and skills like nuanced communication develop much later. Later, Charles, the veterinarian, received the results of the DNA test. He hasn't seen it yet because he wanted to wait to look at it with Rick, the zookeeper. He decides to go into a private room with Rick and see the results of the DNA test together. When they saw the results, they both turned pale. They had never seen anything like this before in their lives. They didn't know what to do next or who to tell this to. This result will shock the whole world, and many investigations will be conducted if this is released to the world. This has never been seen before in monkey species. The monkey's body was found to contain 25% human somatic cells. This was something Charles had only seen in movies, but it was really shocking because it happened in front of his very eyes. It was something neither Rick nor Charles had ever experienced before. How was this monkey born? No relevant DNA matches were found with all other monkeys. Rick and Charles are in a strange dilemma. What should they do now? Contact the zoo manager? Then they'll probably involve government agencies and run experiments on this cute baby monkey. They didn't want that to happen. They wanted to protect the creature at all costs. But they were completely helpless. Rick and Charles didn't know what to do next. In the end, Rick decided to bring the monkey home. At least there, the monkey could be protected from the outside world. At the moment, only Charles and Rick know about the situation. I'm sure no one will notice, Rick thought. Rick brought the monkey home. The monkey seemed a little scared to walk around the house. It took Rick a while to calm him down, but in the end he seemed comfortable. Rick took a few days off so he could be near the baby monkey at home. From that moment on, the monkey became so special to James that he named it Apollo. The monkey continued to grow very fast. This is extremely rare for a monkey species. Rick decided to do some additional DNA testing to see if anything had changed over the past few weeks. He told Charles about it at the zoo, and Charles came over to Rick's house after work. Charles returned to Rick's house and gave Apollo some more DNA tests. The results of the examination still revealed that he contained 25% of human DNA. Nothing had changed during Apollo's stay at Rick's house. Both Rick and Charles decided to let the monkey live in Rick's house for the foreseeable future so they could monitor its growth. The monkey was getting smarter day by day. Rick did a lot of mental challenges with him. He successfully completed almost every challenge, including ones that dogs and cats could do. Rick noticed that Apollo could even learn a bit of sign language after a while. Sign language is very difficult for even adult monkeys to learn, so it took Rick and Apollo quite some time to pull it off. But after both of them worked hard, and soon Apollo learned basic sign language and was able to communicate with his owner. After living together for 7 years, Rick and Sal became best friends. Rick loved the monkey and would do anything to protect him. As the years passed, the monkey began to grow rapidly in strength and intelligence. However, this came to an abrupt end one day. The secret pet is known only to Rick's friend Emma. One day, Emma got into a violent argument with her neighbor in front of her house. Her neighbor pushed Emma roughly. Apollo, who had been watching the whole ordeal through the window, decided that he would protect her and ran out of the house. Apollo did not hesitate and jumped on his neighbor with all his might. He badly injured his neighbor by biting and scratching as hard as he could. Then the situation became dire. The neighbors were so shocked by Apollo that they decided to call the police. Emma thought then that this would not turn out well for Apollo. The police arrived, and Apollo sat inside the house while Emma and Rick talked to neighbors and the police. Rick did everything in his power to solve the problem and avoid turning Apollo over to the police. The neighbors were still angry and wanted to keep Apollo away from this neighborhood, so the cops took Apollo with them. Rick drove to a monkey sanctuary with a police officer. They didn't realize that Apollo was a special monkey, so they went to a monkey sanctuary to have him live with other monkeys. Rick kept going to the reserve to meet Apollo. He found Apollo was not happy at all. Rick was very sad to see Apollo like this. Apollo looked around for any way that he could get out of this place. He soon found a small hole in the upper right corner of the cage that looked very fragile. He might be able to pry it open with your fingers. Apollo tried again and again without success. Then he decided to use all of the force he had left. He heard a loud bang when the cage was almost popped open. Apollo was unable to continue his escape plan as the reserve keeper stood furiously behind him. Apollo crawled to the corner of the cage, but the owner violently grabbed him and took him to another room. Apollo was confused and frightened. What was this man trying to do? The reserve owner pulled out a squirt gun and pointed it at Apollo. The man kept pouring water on Apollo for almost an hour, ignoring Apollo's obvious fear. The next day he returned to the monkey area with all the other monkeys. He looked at each monkey and saw that they were all sickly. Everyone was malnourished and depressed by the poor conditions of the reserve. Apollo began looking for other ways to try to breach the cage again. He took a closer look and found something. Apollo found a way out of the reserve. It was just under the roof. He saw a slightly cracked window below it. He knew that he might be able to pry open the window with his hands and feet. When he was caught a few days ago, he took a look at the layout of the sanctuary so he could find his way back out. He knew it wouldn't take long to get out of the cage. Apollo ate the food given to him, observed the staff, and took in as much information as possible before he tried to escape. Tonight will be the night he gets out. After waiting for a while, the time finally came. When all the staff had already gone home and the vicious sanctuary owner was finally gone, there was no one left in the sanctuary that night. Apollo knew that now was the moment and that the escape was about to begin. Once everyone was out of the reserve, Apollo moved quickly. He has no time to waste and must get out of here as soon as possible. He continued with the work he had begun a few days earlier to widen the holes in the cage. That's when he realized someone had fixed the spot. This is going to be tougher than he expected. Apollo used the immense power of his legs to create new cracks in the cage. It took a while, but eventually he managed to get through the cage and out. Apollo arrived at a common area where all the other monkeys normally reside. He knew exactly where the facility's weak spots were. The roof was in bad shape, so he hurried up to the tree, climbed up, ran up, and jumped on a rock to get on the roof. Apollo had been on the roof the whole time and had already found a small crack in the window. All he had to do was jump through it. He took the plunge and succeeded. He ran to Rick's house. He wanted to get there as soon as possible and live with Rick again. Rick was a little surprised to see Apollo home. How did he get home? Rick wondered. But at the same time, he was so happy that his best friend was back home and out of that dreaded monkey sanctuary. But Apollo had to explain to Rick what happened there. Apollo described in sign language what happened when the water gun was fired at him. He also noted that the other monkeys had each been hit with water guns before and were all undernourished. Because of that, many monkeys at the sanctuary are dying. Rick is completely shocked about what Apollo informed him of. Rick signed back to Apollo that he will file a complaint with the police tomorrow morning. Suddenly, Apollo became enraged and began a rampage in the house. Apollo didn't want Rick to simply file a complaint. The cops would find Apollo again and take him back to the horrible sanctuary with the other monkeys. He couldn't stand to be trapped again. Rick and Apollo had to take matters into their own hands. Rick is amazed at what Apollo told him and how he got here. Apollo seems to have improved his intelligence while in the reserve. He has reached a new level. Rick and Apollo are sitting around the table trying to figure out how to handle the situation. Rick suggests taking revenge on the reserve owner and shooting him with a water gun. Apollo gave Rick a no sign. Then the situation in the monkey sanctuary will not improve. He wanted to do something for the monkeys there. The situation over there is terrible. He wanted to help all of the other monkeys get out like he had. Rick and Apollo decide to come up with a plan on how to free all the other monkeys. Rick asked if Apollo could go back inside and unlock the door for Rick. Is it possible? Apollo nodded in agreement. They were now planning to release all the other monkeys. The plan was to release the monkeys into the woods a few miles from the city. It is a large forest with thousands of trees and wildlife. It would be a great place for the monkeys. Rick and Apollo prepared each other and headed for the reserve. As they got into the car, Rick felt uneasy. He's never done anything like this before. He could even go to jail for this. Rick turned to Apollo and realized that he really wanted to free the other monkeys. Rick is determined to complete this mission and free all the other monkeys. When they arrived at the monkey sanctuary, Apollo immediately climbed onto the sanctuary's roof. About 15 minutes later, the nature reserve's door opened. Rick went inside and followed his sidekick Apollo to all the other monkeys. Rick looks at all the other monkeys, and some of them are so visibly sick he almost cries. But now he had no time to cry. He had to focus on helping them. Apollo comes to Rick with the key from the staff room. Rick freed them all and they all walked to the front of the building. Rick jumped in his car and pulled over to the entrance of the monkey sanctuary. All the monkeys quickly got into the car and Rick drove at full speed and headed for the forest where all the monkeys could be released. Arriving at the forest, all the monkeys jumped in excitement and into the trees quickly. Rick looked at Apollo, who just caught a glimpse of monkeys frolicking cheerfully in the trees. Rick and Apollo looked at each other and nodded in understanding. He was ready to let go of Apollo and give him complete freedom. Apollo and Rick hugged, and Apollo signed to Rick that he appreciated every moment they've had together. At this moment, Rick burst into tears, and Apollo wiped away his tears. "I have only good memories." Then Apollo disappeared into the woods with his fellow monkeys.